20. Nilsa Prent. In July of 2019, embarrassing photos showed Floribama Shore star Nilsa Prent being handcuffed and taken away by police during an alleged public outburst in St. Petersburg, Florida. Also known by the last name Anderson, Prent was accused of drunkenly flashing her bare chest to a crowd and kicking out a car window. Officers originally planned on releasing the young woman, but decided to take her into custody when she became belligerent and combative. Prent was charged with exposure and disorderly conduct. By that point in time, outrageous behavior was nothing new for the Floribama Shore cast. In a preview ahead of the show's third season, a narrator mentioned how the stars had been kicked out of basically every nightlife establishment in St. Pete Beach. During an interview with the Pensacola News-Journal later that year, Prent nonchalantly mentioned how her chest had been making the news for years. She then added that her upcoming season of the show would be no different. Co-star Courtney Gilson laughed about the incident and openly admitted that she thought it was funny to witness Prent's arrest. She also pointed out that up until then, Prent was the only cast member who hadn't been arrested yet. She made it seem almost as if she had finally completed a rite of passage that came along with being on the show. Prent seems to have calmed down in the years since her infamous arrest. In 2021, she married her husband, Gus Gazda. Later that year, she gave birth to the couple's first child. More recently, she's made headlines for her dramatic postpartum weight loss of nearly 100 pounds. She attributes her transformation to a healthy lifestyle, which appears to involve drinking shakes rather than booze. 19. Caroline Werner. Brazilian model Caroline Werner was furious when police arrested her in May of 2023 for walking her dogs topless in the coastal city of Balneario Camboriú. The 37-year-old was charged with performing an obscene act as a result. This led her to question whether Brazil extends the same rights to women as it does to men, who are allowed to walk around topless in public. Werner suggested that the Constitution's guarantee of gender equality wasn't being properly upheld, and accused the authorities of being repressive toward women. She also claimed that she was denied the opportunity to make a phone call to a lawyer or anyone else, despite repeatedly requesting permission to do so. As a worldly businesswoman who has traveled all over the globe, Werner said that she had no problems walking around shirtless in other countries. In fact, in her words, it's a completely normal practice in some places. If convicted as charged, Werner could face up to a year behind bars. 18. Lanisha Henderson. A historic landmark nearly went up in flames in December of 2023, when a woman later identified as 26-year-old U.S. Navy veteran Lanisha Henderson allegedly tried burning down the childhood home of Martin Luther King Jr. in Atlanta. Passers-by called the police after noticing a woman pouring what appeared to be gasoline on the structure. Two tourists from Utah initially thought Henderson was watering some bushes next to the house, but they grew increasingly suspicious as they asked several questions and received no response. They knew something was wrong when they noticed that the container in the woman's hand resembled a gas can rather than a watering can. The men said that they begged Henderson to stop, but she ignored them. At that point, several other witnesses intervened to stop the suspect as she tried to light the accelerant. Thankfully, though, they managed to take the lighter out of Henderson's hand, and the house was undamaged. Henderson was taken to a nearby hospital for a psychiatric evaluation before being booked into custody on suspicion of attempted arson and interfering with government property. Her father told local station WSB-TV that she was experiencing a mental health episode and that he had been looking for her for 2 days. He claimed that she disappeared from her home in Brandon, Florida. Atlanta Police Chief Darren Shirebaum commended the two tourists from Utah for saving an important part of American history. Meanwhile, Henderson remains behind bars without bond while awaiting her next court date. 17. Christy Lynn Weir. In 2019, police in Brisbane, Australia caught 44-year-old mother of 5, Christy Lynn Weir. with a watch and jewelry that had been reported stolen the previous day. On her way to face a judge, she allegedly dropped a used syringe into a garbage can outside the court building. During the court hearing, Weir flashed the judge and dumped the contents of her purse onto the floor while yelling profanities at bystanders. She failed to show up for her next court date 2 weeks later, but this handful of blunders was hardly Weir's first brush with the law. By that point in time, she already had an extensive criminal history which included prior arrests for assault, unlawful use of a motor vehicle, receiving tainted property, and drug charges. For her more recent batch of crimes, including her courtroom outburst, Weir was charged with receiving tainted property, failing to dispose of a syringe, public nuisance, and failure to appear in court. She pleaded guilty to all 4 counts and was sentenced to a year in prison. The judge concluded that it was the only appropriate punishment after Weir had failed to comply with past sentences that had spared her from prison time. In keeping with her tendency toward emotional outbursts, Weir broke down crying upon learning that she was getting locked up. Through tears, she said, "It's not fair," and pitched several other fits before being led away to serve her time. 16. Nathan Lansey. Everybody hopes that their wedding day will go smoothly, but a pair of newlyweds from Wisconsin weren't so lucky after tying the knot in October of 2023. The event was going on at a golf course and wedding venue in the town of Oconomowoc, where police were summoned during the reception over reports that someone had bitten another person's fingertip off. Upon arriving at the scene, officers spotted the suspect, 21-year-old Nathan Lansey, sitting on a couch with blood on his clothing. According to a criminal complaint, Lansey had become loud and agitated after being told to stop groping another attendee. He was moved to a separate room where the bride and groom tried to calm him down, but this only seemed to make him even angrier. Lansey was asked to leave the wedding, at which point he allegedly lunged at a witness. 3 other attendees pinned him to the ground, including the unlucky individual who lost a half-inch chunk of their finger. Onlookers were understandably upset by all the blood and violence, some to the point of tears. The severed finger was placed in a cup of ice while officers arrested Lansey on suspicion of aggravated battery and disorderly conduct. He allegedly smelled of booze and was unaware that he had bitten part of someone's finger off. Surgeons attempted to reattach the severed portion of the victim's finger, but it's unclear whether the procedure was successful. Records now show that Lansey is no longer in custody, but that his case is ongoing. 15. Katana Jordan. In October of 2020, police in Largo, Florida responded to an early morning disturbance at the home of a 69-year-old man and his longtime partner, 46-year-old Katana Jordan. The man told the responding officers that the altercation began as an argument at around 3 a.m. with Jordan over her alleged crack smoking habit. He claimed that Jordan was high and began ordering him to perform a certain act of intimacy on her. When he refused, Jordan allegedly hit and scratched him, leaving him with multiple lacerations that appeared to be inflicted by fingernails. According to an arrest affidavit, a witness backed up the victim's version of events. By the time police arrived, Jordan had fled the residence, but they captured her a short while later with help from canine units. Jordan reportedly claimed that she had acted in self-defense while being choked by her boyfriend, but the cops were unswayed by her story and booked her into custody on suspicion of felony domestic battery, adding to a long list of previous convictions. Her past offenses include aggravated assault, battery, theft, welfare fraud, cocaine possession, grand theft, trespassing, obstruction, violating an order of protection, and more. She had previously been accused of hitting the same boyfriend with a glass vase, and has also faced past allegations of striking her pregnant daughter and her brother-in-law. Records show that Jordan also has several ongoing criminal cases, so no wonder the cops didn't believe her story. 14. Creo Chance Bishop. Most people are understandably uncomfortable with the thought of their partner working as an exotic dancer. But one man allegedly took his disapproval to a criminal level in 2017 when he was accused of trying to burn down his girlfriend's workplace. According to police, 21-year-old Creo Chance Bishop set a fire near the entrance of JB's Gentleman Club in Huntington, West Virginia at around 3:30 a.m. He was then seen running away from the business. The blaze damaged an exterior wall of the club, along with the air conditioning, front door, and surveillance camera. Thankfully, though, nobody was injured, and the flames were extinguished before any serious damage could be done to the building. The total value of the damage was estimated at $1,000, but the outcome could have been much worse. Witnesses reportedly noticed Bishop watching the fire from a Walmart parking lot across the street, where he was picked up by police after someone dialed 911. He was accused of yelling at one passerby to mind their own business when he saw the person take out their cell phone to call law enforcement. During questioning, Bishop allegedly admitted that he tried to burn the club down to stop his girlfriend of 4 years, Michaela Beidenbach, from continuing to work there. As a result, he was charged with second-degree arson. The club's manager, Jim Reed, told local station WSAZ that Beidenbach had been dancing at the establishment for about 6 months when the fire occurred. He described the young woman as quiet and nice, but said that he would have no choice but to fire her for the sake of protecting the business if Bishop was released from custody. For now, the outcome of the case is unclear. 13. Phyllis Jefferson. Akron, Ohio resident Ronnie Buckner and his 50-year-old girlfriend, Phyllis Jefferson, were eating chips and salsa at their apartment one evening in March of 2015 when a heated argument broke out. Jefferson allegedly accused Buckner of eating all the salsa, then grabbed a pen and stabbed him in the pelvis. Buckner also accused his girlfriend of trying to knock over his TV set, which he caught before it could crash onto the floor. According to an arrest report, Jefferson then proceeded to retrieve a small knife and stabbed Buckner in the abdomen with it. Police arrived at the apartment to find the 61-year-old victim covered in blood and clutching his midsection. By that point, Jefferson had gathered her belongings and fled the scene in her vehicle. When she was apprehended a short while later, she reportedly told police that she stabbed Buckner because she wanted to leave the residence. Jefferson ultimately owned up to her actions and pleaded guilty to aggravated assault. She also admitted to her mistakes verbally, stating in court that her decision-making skills that day were not up to par. Due to her lengthy criminal history, which spans multiple states and included a prior conviction for stabbing another man, the judge sentenced her to the maximum penalty of 18 months behind bars. 12. Dustin Tyrell. When you envision what a charge of throwing a missile into an occupied building entails, you probably think of explosives or something equally catastrophic. But it also applies to slightly less destructive items, including rocks, as one Florida man learned in July of 2019. According to an arrest report, 20-year-old Dustin Tyrell hurled a rock through the window of a Wendy's restaurant in Key West. An employee told police that Tyrell repeatedly threw the grapefruit-sized projectile until it broke through the glass. When asked by a passerby why he was doing it, Tyrell reportedly said that it was because Wendy's had stopped carrying Cinnabon rolls. In addition to the charge for throwing a missile into an occupied building, Tyrell was charged with felony criminal mischief. He was released after posting a $15,000 bond. But his bond was revoked in October of 2020, following an incident where he was accused of punching his father in the face. If he was convicted as charged for the Wendy's incident, Tyrell could have faced a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. But he pleaded no contest to both counts and was fortunate enough to avoid prison time. In the end, the judge sentenced him to 4 years of probation and ordered him to stay away from the restaurant where the incident occurred. 11. Cindy Falco Decado. 61-year-old Cindy Falco Decado wasn't exactly unique for her refusal to wear a COVID mask, but she earned the distinction of being a Karen of all Karens when she threw a fit at a bagel shop in Boynton Beach, Florida in 2021. According to the manager at the Einstein Bros store where the incident occurred, Decado entered the business at around 11 a.m. When she refused to wear a mask but also wouldn't leave, the manager called the police. Palm Beach County deputies had not yet reached the scene when she began rambling about how wearing a mask was against her religion and against the amendment. Decado proceeded to cite legal statutes and other supposed expertise, prompting an onlooker to comment sarcastically to the effect of, "Shouldn't you be storming the Capitol?" Even law enforcement struggled to convince Decado that she had no legal right to be in the store if she wasn't going to wear a mask. She told responding deputies to read the Constitution and ordered them to get their hands off her. But she apparently didn't realize that she wasn't in charge of the situation until the deputies carried her outside. As they attempted to handcuff her, she screamed repeatedly and resisted, claiming that she couldn't breathe even though her airway was completely unobstructed. Decado could also be heard yelling, "I'm not under arrest," but she was definitely under arrest. Once she figured that much out, she demanded to know why she was being apprehended. A deputy told her that she was trespassing, and she argued that it wasn't possible to trespass into a public business that rents their shop from someone else. In addition to the trespassing charge, Decado was charged with resisting arrest without violence. A year earlier, she'd been arrested at a restaurant in West Palm Beach for resisting and trespassing after she allegedly refused to wear a mask following the arrest of 2 of her friends the previous day. In February of 2022, a jury found Decado guilty of 1 count each of trespassing and resisting. She could have faced a year in jail for each conviction, but the prosecutor recommended 6 months of probation, while Decado's supporters urged the judge for no punishment. She walked away with no probation and an order to pay a $411 fine. Despite her continued bizarre and outrageous behavior throughout the trial. While representing herself in the case, she identified herself as the woman arrested, kidnapped, photographed, and detained. At another point during the hearing, Decado got down on her stomach on the courtroom floor and recited the Lord's Prayer a dozen or more times before she began speaking in tongues. And the judge did nothing to stop her as the strange display continued for at least 10 minutes. Even after the case was resolved with an arguably generous outcome, Decado's supporters were unsatisfied. They took their fight outside the courtroom and campaigned to the governor for a full pardon. As it turned out, Decado's outrageous behavior didn't start during the COVID era. Back in 2017, she resigned from the Boynton Beach Advisory Board after being accused of making racist remarks. Despite her history of out-of-control behavior, she clearly had a sizable following, which makes it slightly frightening that she ran for mayor of Boynton Beach in 2022. She lost to the city's first openly gay mayor, Ty Pensurga, which she probably wasn't very happy about, and continues to be a vocal and controversial member of her community. 10. Andrew Els. It's common for thieves to steal by creating a distraction that will draw attention away from them, and some come up with more creative ways of doing this than others. In 2019, a 27-year-old North Dakota man named Andrew Els allegedly sought to divert Walmart employees to the gardening section of a store in Bismarck by lighting a Bible on fire. He was accused of lighting the Holy Book ablaze behind a stack of boxes while disguised in a camouflage balaclava. Surveillance footage showed the suspect fleeing the department, but authorities didn't specify whether he made off with any stolen merchandise. According to court documents, nobody was injured in the fire, but the smoke destroyed roughly $300,000 worth of merchandise. Els was captured at around 4 a.m., admitting that he brought the Bible into the store along with some lighter fluid, which he used as an accelerant. He was charged with felony arson and endangering by fire or explosion. Records show that the arson count was dismissed, Els was convicted of the endangering by fire or explosion charge and was sentenced to 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years of probation. He was also ordered to attend anger management. 9. Daniel Willis Taylor. If you've ever worked on a holiday, you've probably at least hoped that the day would go smoothly and as hassle-free as possible. This was likely the case for the employees at a McDonald's restaurant in St. Petersburg, Florida, when they clocked in for their shift on New Year's Eve in 2018. The day took a chaotic turn when a disgruntled transient, later identified as 40-year-old Daniel Willis Taylor, became confrontational when he couldn't find a straw. He allegedly grabbed 20-year-old worker Yasmin James by the shirt collar and jerked her forward, prompting the young woman to punch him in an attempt to loosen his grip. Taylor then snapped his finger at a manager and demanded a refund, but was told to leave the restaurant. While being escorted toward the exit, he kicked worker Tatiana Bell in the stomach. The outburst was captured on surveillance footage, and police arrested Taylor on 2 misdemeanor battery counts. Initial reports of the incident stated that alcohol may have been a factor, but there's no mention of it in the court documents. Taylor pleaded no contest to both charges and was sentenced to 60 days in jail with credit for 58 days already served. He was also ordered to stay away from the victims and the McDonald's restaurant where the altercation occurred. 8. Stephen Irvin Saunders IV. When a teenage girl accidentally cut off an investment banker in traffic in December of 2021, he allegedly reacted with physical violence. According to police, 47-year-old Stephen Irvin Saunders IV was cruising around in his Porsche a few miles from his waterfront home in Tampa at around 10:30 p.m. when the incident took place. A report states that Saunders followed the young woman to an intersection and then cut her off in front of a red light. He was accused of exiting his car, screaming at the woman and calling her a name, then punching her in the face with a closed fist. The victim went to the police with a description of the suspect's distinctive Porsche and reported that she suffered redness, soreness, and bruising to her jaw. She successfully picked Saunders out of a lineup of photos, and law enforcement proceeded to arrest him on 1 felony count of burglary of a conveyance with assault or battery. Saunders was released from the Hillsborough County Jail after posting a $15,000 bond. He pleaded not guilty to the charge. 7. Manica Garner. 25-year-old Manica Garner and 36-year-old Precious Jackson became enemies while living in the same duplex in the Cleveland suburb of South Euclid, Ohio. It's unclear what sparked the rivalry between the women, but their inability to get along eventually got so unbearable that Jackson obtained an order of protection against Garner. The women were no longer neighbors when they crossed paths at a Walmart store in May of 2021. But the protective order was still in effect, and Garner had apparently not yet let go of her ill feelings toward Jackson. She allegedly threatened to beat Jackson and the woman's daughter. She then proceeded to pull Jackson's COVID mask down and attempted to spit on her. Jackson then grabbed a 10-pound log of ground beef out of Jackson's cart and battered her with it, striking her in the face several times. Police arrested Garner on suspicion of misdemeanor assault and violating a protective order. According to law enforcement, she had a history of violent behavior and had multiple active warrants out for her arrest at the time. During questioning, Garner told police that she was under the impression that Jackson's order of protection against her had expired. She initially pleaded not guilty to the charges, but ultimately pleaded no contest to disorderly conduct. The judge imposed a 30-day suspended jail sentence and a year of probation. 6. Nicholas Ruthenberg. August 30th, 2021 should have been a happy day for 25-year-old Nicholas Ruthenberg. It was the day of his wedding, but things took a terrible turn when he allegedly struck a car while driving the wrong way along a one-way street in Vero Beach. According to police, Ruthenberg fled the scene on foot while the other driver was hospitalized with non-life-threatening injuries. Police caught up with Ruthenberg near the crash scene and later noted in a report that he appeared to be under the influence of an unknown substance. He was acting erratic and failed a series of sobriety tests despite having no alcohol in his system. The chaos continued at the local jail, where Ruthenberg allegedly shouted, "All hail Donald Trump," while he was being booked into custody. In an attempt to determine what drugs Ruthenberg may have taken, an officer asked for a urine sample. While waiting to give a specimen, the suspect allegedly removed his pants and spread his buttocks, prompting staff members to handcuff him. When a second attempt was made to discuss Ruthenberg's drug use, he reportedly began acting erratic again. An investigator concluded that his behavior was consistent with stimulant use. He became so out of control that several staff members had to hold him in place while taking his mugshot. Ruthenberg was charged with driving under the influence and leaving the scene of an accident causing serious bodily injury. He was later released from jail after posting $2,000 bond. 5. Rebecca Lynn Phelps. A Florida man wasn't expecting to get hit in the face when he told Rebecca Lynn Phelps he wasn't in the mood for intimacy during an evening of drinking in September of 2017. But that's allegedly what happened. According to an arrest report, Phelps began yelling at the victim outside his home and slapped him so hard that it left a red mark on his face. He yelled at her to stop before he called the police, which only seemed to make her even angrier. The victim made good on his promise to call the police, and Phelps was arrested. But prosecutors ultimately decided not to pursue the case. A suspiciously similar incident happened 14 months later in November of 2018, when Phelps was accused of battering her 25-year-old boyfriend after he said no when she was feeling frisky. According to court documents, Phelps tried initiating intimacy on Thanksgiving night, only to have her boyfriend roll over and go back to sleep. The victim told police that Phelps was intoxicated when she began tapping his leg, and that he pretended to be unconscious. Phelps allegedly scratched the victim's eye, causing it to swell and leaving a black and blue mark. She denied the allegations and was booked on a misdemeanor battery charge. 4. Philip Leon Weaver. In a cruel prank that was captured on camera in August 2018, a wannabe YouTuber dumped a bag of flour on an elderly woman's head at a Walmart store in Beech Grove, Indiana. According to police, 22-year-old Philip Leon Weaver filmed himself sneaking up behind the victim, who was shopping for her grandchildren. He could be heard saying, "It's going down," shortly before he unloaded the powdery substance over the woman's head. Weaver was apparently proud enough of his prank to post the video online. In the meantime, police responded to the scene and spoke with the visibly distressed victim, who was physically unharmed but had some difficulty breathing. She was also emotionally traumatized, especially since she didn't know what had been spilled on her or if it was hazardous. The footage helped investigators identify Weaver as their suspect. Reporters stated that he had a history of pulling pranks at that particular Walmart store, but his latest prank was severe enough for the authorities to arrest him on suspicion of criminal mischief, battery, and theft. Records show that Weaver took a plea deal and was convicted of theft and battery. He received a suspended jail sentence and was sentenced to probation with credit for time served. He was also ordered to stay out of the Beech Grove Walmart store. This wasn't the first time a crazy incident happened at the Beech Grove store. Back in 2015, 2 women made news headlines for getting into a vicious brawl in the store's health and beauty section, later identified as Rebecca Mills and Amber Stevenson. Both women suffered minor injuries and faced criminal charges for their accused roles in the fight. Stevenson was accused of not only starting the fight, but also involving her young son in it by encouraging him to participate. She pleaded guilty to neglect of a dependent in exchange for getting the other 2 charges dropped and was sentenced to probation. The judge also ordered her to complete a substance abuse program and perform community service. 3. Shaunetta Wilson. Accidentally letting one slip in public is undeniably embarrassing. But one Florida woman was accused of taking her reaction too far in 2018. when someone commented about her loud flatulence inside a Broward County Dollar General store. According to police, 37-year-old Shaunetta Wilson confronted a disapproving man who offered his unwelcome 2 cents about her passing gas in the checkout line. Wilson allegedly removed a small pocket knife from her purse and threatened to gut 55-year-old John Walker while holding the weapon as if she were about to attack. This caused Walker to fear that he was going to be stabbed. Police responded to the store in Dania Beach and arrested Wilson nearby on a felony charge of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon without the intent to kill. She had a lengthy criminal history, which included prior convictions for battery, theft, violating probation, and possession of cocaine with intent to sell. But Wilson caught a lucky break in this case when the victim repeatedly refused to cooperate with the prosecution, leading the state to drop the charges. 2. Jason Allen Dobbins. Many women love the thought of having a man who stands up for them, but one Florida husband learned through experience that sometimes it comes with a price of being arrested. The incident in question occurred at a Dollar Tree store in Clearwater, Florida in December of 2022. An employee, 20-year-old Genesis Sanchez Canales, told police that it all began with an argument between them and a female customer over grocery bags. The woman was allegedly being difficult and began filming her interaction with Canales, who called her a Karen in return. According to a police report, Dobbins slapped Canales across the cheek with an open hand, prompting her to call 911. Because he had a prior battery conviction, Dobbins was charged with felony-level battery for the alleged attack against Canales. He admitted that there had been a confrontation between his wife and the victim over grocery bags, but he said that he didn't wish to speak any further about the incident. In the report, police noted that a witness had seen the altercation and was able to verify what happened. Dobbins pleaded not guilty and was released after posting bond. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Tanya Hopper and Larry Webster. Lawnmowers are loud, so of course the residents of Jasper County, Missouri couldn't help but look when a naked couple used one as their chosen method of transportation along a local road in 2016. According to court documents, a witness called the police at around 10 a.m. and reported seeing a nude man riding an orange lawnmower outside the city of Joplin with an equally unclothed woman on his lap. 55-year-old Larry Webster and 40-year-old Tanya Hopper allegedly admitted to the naked joyride. They claimed that someone had stolen their clothes while they were skinny dipping in the nearby Turkey Creek, and that they decided to drive home on the lawnmower after discovering it abandoned in the woods. The couple seemed to believe it was a better alternative to walking home in the nude. But as it turned out, the $5,000 lawnmower had recently been reported stolen out of the owner's yard. The owner denied the suspects' claims that they had found the machine in the woods and said that he wished to press charges. Webster and Hopper were booked on felony theft charges, but they weren't charged with any crimes for being naked. It's probably safe to assume that they wished they would have walked. Sure, it may have earned them some strange looks from local residents, but it would have possibly spared them from getting arrested.
Number 9. Hit-and-run driver strikes again. 3 TikTokers in Westminster, Colorado had their cameras rolling from different angles when they captured footage of the aftermath of a multi-car hit-and-run in April 2023. In the videos, a woman could be seen exiting from the driver's side of a silver car that had rammed into a pickup truck. She walked calmly from the scene until the driver of the pickup truck opened his door and began exiting the vehicle, at which point the woman picked up the pace and ran. One of the TikTokers, Natalie Sandoval, chased after the suspect and jokingly asked if she wanted a ride. The woman briefly turned around and said, "For real, let's go," only to quickly turn around and continue running away. A victim at the crime scene suffered a broken arm. The 21-year-old suspect was captured nearly 2 months later, thanks to a civilian who followed her in their car and informed police of her whereabouts. As it turned out, she had a warrant out for her arrest in connection with another crash that had occurred back in 2020. In addition to booking her on a second hit-and-run charge for the most recent incident, authorities cited her for numerous traffic violations. Number 8. Stanley Eric Mossberg. One evening in October 2019, 911 dispatchers in Polk County, Florida, received a call from a man who said an unknown suspect had barged into his home, killed his 2 roommates, and held him captive for 14 hours. The victim said he came home from work the previous night to find the suspect there. A male roommate had already been murdered, while a female roommate was tied up and still alive. She told the man to cooperate with the suspect to avoid getting hurt. The captor, later identified as a wanted fugitive from Greenville, Tennessee, named Stanley Eric Mossberg, tied the 3rd victim up in a separate room. Throughout the night, Mossberg filled luggage with all 3 victims' belongings. At one point, he killed the female victim and told the lone surviving resident about it. During the early afternoon, Mossberg told the man he would be back to deal with the dead bodies. He threatened to kill the man if he called the police, and fled the scene in the female victim's car. The terrified survivor waited 5 hours before running to a neighbor who dialed 911. Police located the house where they believed Mossberg was hiding out and spent the night trying to negotiate with him using a PA system. They tried forcing Mossberg to surrender by filling the home with a chemical agent, but he refused and repeatedly shot at the team. Early the next morning, a SWAT armored vehicle drove into the garage where Mossberg was hiding under a pool table, and a K-9 apprehended him. In addition to the first-degree murder charge he was wanted on out of Tennessee, Mossberg was hit with 16 counts in Florida, including murder, attempted murder of a police officer, armed burglary with assault, resisting arrest with violence, and more. He remains behind bars in Florida amid numerous trial delays. Number 7. Lucifer Nguan. By the time police responded to a call about an armed home invasion in Mendota Heights, Minnesota one morning in 2017, the suspect had fled the scene. Later identified as 44-year-old Lucifer Nguan, the intruder robbed a homeowner at gunpoint and sped off in a white sedan. When an officer tried pulling the car over, Nguan initially appeared to cooperate, but he stepped on the gas and managed to elude capture. The car was later found in a pond, but Nguan was not in it. Shortly after finding the vehicle, police received a call about an armed gunman at a senior living facility located very close to the pond. It was in the same direction that a witness had reported seeing Nguan running in after he crashed the car. He had forced his way into the building at gunpoint and fatally shot 48-year-old Beverly Corey, and he fled the scene in her car before police could get to him. Later that morning, he knocked on a stranger's door and asked for a ride to a casino, and he also bought a cell phone at Walmart. Authorities finally captured Nguan shortly before midnight. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and 2 counts of aggravated robbery, and was sentenced to more than 45 years in prison, with a minimum of 30 years before becoming eligible for parole. Number 6. John Mcclusky. In July 2010, inmates Tracy Allen Province and John Mcclusky escaped from a state prison in Kingman, Arizona, with help from Mcclusky's girlfriend, Caslin May Welsh. A few days later, the trio allegedly carjacked Oklahoma couple Gary and Linda Haas at a rest stop along Interstate 40 in New Mexico. Mcclusky, who was serving a 43-year sentence for attempted murder at the time of the escape, fatally shot the couple. He and Province then drove to a remote area and set Gary and Linda's trailer on fire with their bodies inside. According to federal authorities, Mcclusky committed multiple other kidnappings during his time on the run. Police discovered the Haas's charred remains 5 days after the escape. 4 days later, they captured Province. Another 10 days after that, Mcclusky and Welsh were apprehended, bringing the nationwide 20-day manhunt to an end. Mcclusky had a lengthy criminal history spanning multiple states, which included prior convictions for at least 2 counts of aggravated assault with a firearm, 4 armed robberies, kidnapping, escape, and more. At the end of his 4-month trial for the multi-state crime spree following the 2010 escape, a federal judge found him guilty on all 20 counts listed in his indictment. He was sentenced to life in prison after the jury was unable to unanimously agree on whether or not to recommend the death penalty. Mcclusky died in prison in 2017 after serving just a handful of years for his most recent batch of crimes. He had been in poor health for several years leading up to his death, which was attributed to natural causes. Number 5. Christopher Prey. Described by police as an extremely dangerous felon, 39-year-old Christopher Prey bolted from a psychiatric hospital in Salem, Oregon, while fully shackled in August 2023. His handcuffs were attached to a belly chain, and his legs were also chained when he slipped out of the hospital unnoticed and sped off in a stolen minivan. A high-speed chase followed as state troopers tried to catch up with and disable the vehicle, but the police eventually decided to pull out of the pursuit for safety reasons. While considering the next move, the agency warned the public not to approach Prey and to dial 911 immediately in the event of a sighting. The fleeing fugitive has at least 16 felony convictions under his belt, including for robbery, resisting arrest, being a felon in possession of a weapon, and smuggling contraband into prison. At the time of his escape, Prey was being detained on multiple pending charges in connection with an incident that occurred in early 2022, including attempted aggravated murder, robbery, assault, and a gun charge. He's accused of nearly killing a woman during a robbery and attacking another woman with a tool during a domestic dispute. After being found incompetent to stand trial days before the escape, Prey was admitted to a state hospital where he got into an altercation with another patient. Following his escape, he was found stuck in mud up to his armpits in a pond. He allegedly gave police a false name, but was quickly identified by a hospital employee who recognized him and called law enforcement. Photos and videos showed fire personnel standing on a ladder and fishing Prey out of the pond using ropes. Authorities have not revealed exactly how Prey escaped custody, but have reassured the public that an investigation is underway. Number 4. Stuart Pinkham. 33-year-old Stuart Pinkham was wanted out of South Haven, Mississippi for carjacking, kidnapping, aggravated assault, and evading arrest when he allegedly went on a violent crime spree in Memphis, Tennessee in early 2023. According to police, he committed 2 shootings over a 2-day period in March, seriously wounding one victim and killing another. During the first incident, a woman claiming to be Pinkham's girlfriend was shot in the eye while sitting in her car and talking to a friend. She told police that Pinkham then yanked her out of the car and fled the scene of the vehicle. The next day, a witness called 911 and reported seeing a man shot in the chest outside a residence. As the victim ran toward the house, the shooter fired several more times. Multiple law enforcement agencies worked together to locate and apprehend Pinkham, including a U.S. Marshals Violent Fugitive Task Force. 2 days after the second shooting, the team tracked the fugitive to a local residence and surrounded the home. Thankfully, he surrendered without incident. In addition to the charges out of Mississippi, he now faces 1 count each of murder, attempted second-degree murder, and possession of a firearm with the intent to commit a felony. He faces 2 counts each of attempted first-degree murder, being a felon in possession of a firearm, aggravated assault, and use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. Number 3. Ernesto Alfredo Piñon de la Cruz. On New Year's Day 2023, 30 inmates violently escaped from a prison in Juarez, Mexico, near the United States border. The breakout was carried out with help from people on the outside, who stormed the prison with an armored vehicle and shot at guards. 10 officers, 7 inmates, and 2 attackers died in the ensuing chaos, while 13 others were injured. Among those who fled the prison was notorious Los Mexicles cartel leader Ernesto Alfredo Piñon de la Cruz. Better known by his street name El Neto, authorities considered him to be the leader of the breakout. He had been locked up for 12 years at the time of the escape. Piñon was first identified as a dangerous organized criminal in 2007 when he was just 18 years old. In 2010, he was sentenced to 224 years in prison for homicide and kidnapping. 3 days after the escape, Chihuahua State Police tracked the kingpin to a residence in the Los Aztecas neighborhood of Juarez. They attempted to take the gang leader into custody during the pre-dawn hours, but were shot at from inside the residence. Piñon fled the scene in a vehicle and drove to a nearby gas station where he crashed the car and continued to shoot at police. Officers returned fire, striking Piñon several times. Ernesto was critically injured, but police were worried that taking him to an emergency room would make the hospital a target for the Mcclusky. They opted instead to take him to a police station, and he died on the way there. Police seized an armored car, 8 rifles, and 5 bulletproof vests from the crime scene. But the chaos didn't end with Pignon's death. In retaliation for the loss of their leader, Mcclusky's members set fire to a convenience store and multiple vehicles. Number 2. Floyd Ray Cook. During what began as a normal traffic stop in Allgood, Tennessee in 2005, 62-year-old Floyd Ray Cook shot and wounded a police officer. Cook was a seasoned criminal. At the time of the traffic stop, he was wanted in Marion County, Kentucky for failing to register as an offender in connection with a past assault case. He was also wanted in Hardin County, Kentucky for trafficking methamphetamine and tampering with evidence. After shooting the officer in Allgood, Floyd fled in his pickup truck. He was spotted about an hour later just over the Kentucky border in rural Cumberland County. When a state trooper tried to pull him over, he attempted to speed off and wrecked his truck. Floyd fled on foot, sparking a major manhunt along the Kentucky-Tennessee border. Residents remained on edge as law enforcement searched high and low. Schools canceled classes for 3 days in a row, while entire communities waited for life to return to normal. A few days into the search, an investigator spotted a car Cook was thought to be traveling in outside a gas station in White House, Tennessee. When a marshal approached, the driver tried to flee, hitting 2 cop cars in the process and narrowly missing an officer on foot. Police fired at the car, which sped off down a street and through a fence. It crashed in a ravine, and the occupants ran off into a nearby cornfield. They were later identified as 2 of Cook's associates, but Cook himself was not in the car. A week into the manhunt, state troopers and a federal marshal encountered the fugitive while searching an embankment in Burkesville, Kentucky. Instead of cooperating, Cook shot at law enforcement and they returned fire. Cook was killed in the shootout, bringing his chaotic run from the law to a harrowing end. Number 1. Escaped prisoners die in car crash. In November 2020, 69 pre-trial detainees escaped a detention center in Babda, Lebanon, on the outskirts of Beirut. The mass jailbreak occurred despite tight security when inmates broke open their cell doors and attacked guards. During the large-scale manhunt that ensued, 5 inmates were killed when the stolen car they were fleeing in crashed. The driver lost control of the vehicle, which was traveling at a high speed, and the car struck a tree. 1 survivor was taken to the hospital with injuries. Speaking to the news outlet AFP, prosecutor Ghada Aoun said that an investigation into the breakout was underway and that authorities had not ruled out the possibility of inmates colluding with guards. The escape reportedly came on the heels of riots inside overcrowded Lebanese jails over the dangers of the COVID-19 virus. Families of inmates had also expressed discontent by staging sit-in protests outside detention facilities. In addition to the 5 prisoners who died in the car crash, authorities recaptured 15 escapees and 4 turned themselves in. As of February 2021, the remaining 44 inmates were still at large.
Have you ever been accused of making a ruckus over a complaint that you believed was completely valid? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.